Tacky old woman. You're just bitter because my parents have money. My daughter-in-law screamed at me during my birthday party. My son laughed. She's right, Mom. You're just jealous of our success. I smiled and said, then tell your parents to pay back the $3 million they borrowed from my company. The room went silent. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Kisha Kelly from Akron, Ohio. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The birthday celebration was meant to be special. After 40 years of running my small flower shop, my neighbors had surprised me with a party at the community center. Pink balloons everywhere, a chocolate cake with "Happy 65th Birthday, Ruth" written in purple frosting. I should have felt happy. But there I stood, watching my son Jake nod as his wife Carmen called me bitter and jealous. You live in that tiny house behind your flower shop, Carmen continued, her diamond earrings catching the light. You wear the same old clothes every day. You're just mad because we have nice things and you don't. Everyone at the party was staring. My customers, my friends from church, even the kids from the neighborhood. I felt my cheeks burning hot with shame. Carmen kept talking, pointing her perfectly painted nails at me. Jake told me how you struggle to pay your bills. How you eat soup for dinner most nights. It's sad, really. She turned to face everyone else. She keeps trying to give us advice about money when she can barely keep her flower shop open. Poor thing doesn't understand that some people are just more successful than others. People started looking at me with pity. Mrs. Johnson from next door shook her head sadly. Really, Mom? Jake added, sounding bored. Why don't you just accept that Carmen's family knows about business? You're not needed anymore. Your little flower shop isn't exactly a big company. Those words hit me like a slap. This was my 35-year-old son. The boy I raised alone after his father died when Jake was only 6. The child I worked 3 jobs for. The teenager I sent to college even when I ate peanut butter sandwiches for weeks to save money. Carmen was still talking, her voice getting louder and meaner. Honestly, Ruth, it's embarrassing how you try to act like you know about business. We know you're broke. Jake told me about your little house, your old truck. It's pathetic, really. She looked around at everyone watching. She keeps trying to tell us how to spend money when she shops at thrift stores and clips coupons like it's her job. It's just sad. I could see people felt sorry for me. The way they looked away when I tried to catch their eyes. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store actually shook his head like I was some poor old lady who needed help. That's when something inside me broke. Not the loud kind of breaking that makes you yell. Quiet kind. The kind that feels like a door closing forever. I took a deep breath and smiled. Not the fake smile I'd been wearing, but a real one. The kind that comes when you stop pretending to be something you're not. Carmen, sweetheart, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. Since you want to talk about money, let's talk about something important. She rolled her eyes. Oh great. Here comes another lecture from the broke flower lady. $3 million, I said, still smiling. Carmen's face went white so fast I thought she might fall over. She grabbed Jake's arm to steady herself. What are you talking about? Jake asked, but his voice wasn't confident anymore. I turned to speak to everyone the same way Carmen had been doing. You see, everyone, Carmen's parents needed help with their restaurant business a few years ago. $3 million to be exact. They were about to lose everything. Carmen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't. I can and I am, I said nicely. The loan was made 4 years ago with fair terms. 3% interest to be paid back over 10 years. But they've only made payments for about 8 months. Everyone was staring now, but not at me with pity anymore. They were looking between Carmen and me like they were watching a tennis game. That's impossible, Carmen whispered, but her voice cracked. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Would anyone like to see the loan papers? Everything is legal and proper. Jake stepped closer, looking at my phone screen. His face went pale when he saw the numbers. Mom, what is this? How do you have $3,200,018? I said clearly. That's what your wife's parents owe my company right now, including the interest they've been ignoring. Carmen made a choking sound and grabbed the back of a chair. This has to be wrong. You run a flower shop. You live in that tiny house. You drive a 20-year-old truck. I do drive an old truck, I agreed. And I do live in a small house. But you know what they say about judging people by what you see. The room was completely quiet except for the birthday music still playing softly. You see, I continued, feeling stronger with each word. Your parents came to me in a panic 4 years ago. Their restaurant was failing. They were going to lose everything and needed money immediately. They heard through friends that my investment company might help them. Carmen shook her head frantically. No, no, no. My parents have money. They've always been successful. They paid for our wedding. They bought us our car. With my money, I said simply. All of it. Every dollar they've spent came from that loan. Jake sank into a chair, his face confused and pale. But you always said money was tight. You said you were just getting by with the flower shop. I said I lived simply, I corrected. I never said I was poor. Carmen was breathing fast and looking around like she wanted to run away. This is crazy. You're lying. You're making this up because you're jealous of our life. Should I call your parents right now? I asked, finding their number on my phone. I'm sure they'd be happy to explain everything. No, Carmen almost shouted, then got quiet when she realized how loud she was. No, don't call them. Why not, dear? If I'm lying, they'd be happy to tell everyone the truth. Carmen's face crumpled, and she looked like a scared little girl instead of the mean woman who had been hurting me. Please, she whispered. Please don't do this. But I was done trying to make people happy who never cared about my feelings. I was done being treated like I was worthless by the family I had given everything for. I looked around the room one more time at all the faces staring at me with new respect. Then I looked at my son, still sitting in his chair, still trying to understand what he'd just learned. Enjoy the rest of the party, everyone, I said, putting my phone back in my purse. I think I'll go home now. As I walked toward the door, I could hear Carmen's voice behind me, high and desperate. Ruth, wait. We need to talk. We need to. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. And with each step, I felt lighter than I had in years. The community center volunteer brought my old truck around, and as I drove away, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, I thought, was going to be very interesting. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I sat in my small living room with a cup of tea, looking at photo albums and business papers I hadn't touched in years. The quiet felt different now. Not lonely, but peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about making anyone else happy. The photos told a story I'd almost forgotten. There I was at 25, holding baby Jake in the hospital, tired but smiling. My husband Tom had died just 3 months before in a car accident, leaving me with a house payment, a new baby, and only $200 in the bank. I touched the picture, remembering that scared young woman. She had no idea what she could do. The insurance money from Tom's death wasn't much. Barely enough to pay for the funeral and a few months of house payments. Everyone told me to sell the house, move in with my parents, take any help I could get. But something inside me said no. This was Jake's home. This was where his father had painted the baby room yellow and built a toy box we never got to use together. So I kept the house and found work. Not just one job but 3 jobs. I cleaned offices at night, worked at the grocery store in the morning, and started selling flowers from my garden on weekends. The flower business grew slowly. People loved my roses and my friendly smile. Within 2 years, I had enough customers to rent a small shop downtown. Within 5 years, I owned the building. But I was building something else too. Started small. I noticed that other small business owners needed help with their money problems. I started giving advice, helping them save money and make better choices. Word spread quickly. Soon I was helping restaurants, shops, and service companies manage their money. I charged small fees and got great results. My reputation grew. By the time Jake was in high school, I was managing investments for 20 local businesses. I had started my own investment company, kept it quiet, and put the profits into smart investments and real estate. I lived simply, drove old cars, and let everyone think I was just getting by with my flower shop. The truth was, I was building something bigger than anyone knew. I learned early that people treat you differently when they think you have money. They want things from you, expect things, feel like they deserve pieces of your success. I watched wealthy business clients deal with family members always asking for money, children who expected everything handed to them, friends who only called when they needed something. I didn't want that for Jake. I wanted him to have a normal childhood, to learn to work hard, to develop his own values. So I hid my growing wealth behind my simple life. I shopped at discount stores, used coupons, complained about prices like my neighbors did. But I also made sure Jake never went without anything important. Private school appeared when he needed it. College money was there when the time came. There was always money for the things that mattered. I just made it look like I was struggling and sacrificing for him. Looking back now, I can see the problems with my plan. I was so worried about not spoiling Jake that I went too far the other way. He grew up thinking I was barely making ends meet, that every opportunity he had came from my struggle and sacrifice. In some ways that was true. But he never understood how successful I really was, the security I had created for both of us. When Jake finished college with a business degree, I quietly used my connections to help him get his first job. When he wanted to start his own accounting firm, I made sure several of my business clients became his first customers. When he needed to expand, I helped make sure the bank approved his loan. He thought he was succeeding on his own, and in many ways he was. I had raised him to be smart and hardworking, but I had also been helping him in ways he never knew about. Then came Carmen. I remember the first time Jake brought her home for dinner. She was beautiful in that expensive way that spoke of country club memberships and fancy vacations. Her clothes were designer, her jewelry was real, her confidence was unshakable. She looked around my simple house with barely hidden disgust, making comments about the cute decorations and cozy space. During dinner, she told us stories about her parents' latest trip to Hawaii, their new boat, their plans to open a second restaurant. She talked about money casually, like someone who had never worried about it. When she mentioned that her father owned 2 successful restaurants, I understood where the wealth came from. What I didn't understand was why she seemed so determined to make me feel small. "Jake tells me you have a flower shop," she said, the words dripping with pity. "That must be hard, making enough money on flower sales." I smiled politely and said it was honest work. I didn't mention that I had just helped a client make more money in 6 months than most people made in 2 years. After they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been judged and found worthless. Carmen had looked at my small house, my simple lifestyle, and decided I didn't matter. I told myself it didn't matter what she thought. But as their relationship got serious, I started seeing changes in Jake. He began making comments about my situation, asking if I needed help with bills, suggesting I might want to think about moving to a smaller place to save money. The worry in his voice was real, but it hurt. My own son was starting to see me through Carmen's eyes. The wedding was a huge event that cost more than most people's houses. Carmen's parents spent like money was no object. They flew in flowers from California and hired a band that had played at celebrity weddings. I wore a simple dress from the department store and sat in the back, watching my son marry into a world that made my life seem small and unimportant. After the wedding, the distance grew. Jake and Carmen moved into a house that Carmen's parents had helped them buy, filled it with expensive furniture and art that cost more than I had spent on furniture in my entire life. When I visited, I felt like a tourist in a museum, afraid to touch anything. Carmen was always polite, but in the way you're polite to the delivery person or a distant relative. She would ask about my flower shop with fake interest, comment on my cute truck, offer to help me find better clothes. Every conversation left me feeling smaller and less important. And Jake, maybe without even knowing it, started to see me the way she did. He stopped asking for my advice about business decisions. He stopped calling as often. When we did talk, it felt forced, like he was talking to an elderly aunt he felt sorry for rather than his mother. That's when Carmen's parents contacted me. It was 4 years ago on a Wednesday evening when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Maria Santos, Carmen's mother, was crying on the other end. "Ruth, I hope you don't mind me calling, but we're in trouble and someone said you might be able to help." The story came out slowly. Bad business decisions, market problems, cash flow issues that had gotten out of control. The restaurants were losing money, creditors were demanding payment, and bankruptcy was coming. They needed money immediately, and regular banks had said no. "We heard through mutual friends that you might have resources," Maria said carefully. "Connections perhaps, or knowledge of private lenders." I almost laughed. Here was this woman who had looked down on me for years, calling to ask for help from the poor flower shop lady. But something in her voice stopped me. Real fear. The terror of losing everything she had built, everything that defined her family's identity. Could have said no. I should have said no, probably. But I thought about Jake, about how devastated he would be if his wife's family lost everything. I thought about Carmen, for all her faults, and how this would destroy the world she had grown up in. And maybe deep down I thought this might be a bridge, a way to finally be seen as valuable, as someone worth respecting. "How much do you need?" I asked. The amount was shocking. $3 million, more money than most people see in a lifetime. But I had it, sitting in investment accounts that had been growing steadily for decades. We met the next day at a lawyer's office downtown. Maria and Carlos Santos sat across from me, their faces pale with stress and embarrassment. The lawyer, a professional woman in her 50s who specialized in business loans, walked us through the terms. 3% interest payable monthly over 10 years, personal guarantees from both Maria and Carlos, full disclosure to immediate family members about the loan structure. Except there was no disclosure. The Santos family made it clear they wanted to keep the details private to protect their dignity and their daughter's respect. Understood. Pride is a powerful thing, and they had already swallowed enough of theirs to ask for help. So we structured it as a private investment in their business. To everyone else, including Carmen and Jake, it would look like the Santos family had found an investor, not that they were borrowing money from the woman their daughter treated like a charity case. The first few months went well. The payments came on time, the restaurants got better, and the Santos family kept their lifestyle. Carmen never knew how close they had come to losing everything or who had saved them. But then the payments started coming late. Then they stopped completely. Now, sitting in my living room with the loan documents spread on my coffee table, I realized what I should have seen from the beginning. The Santos family hadn't just been borrowing money. They had been buying time, keeping up appearances, hoping something would change. And when nothing did, they had simply decided to ignore their obligations. After all, what could the poor flower shop lady do about it? They were about to find out. The morning after my birthday party, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of hurt and confusion was gone, replaced by something sharper and more focused. I made my coffee, sat at my kitchen table and started making phone calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Patricia Miller. I had used her services for years to handle my business contracts and investments, but we had never been particularly close. That was about to change. "Patricia, it's Ruth. I need to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. It's about the Santos loan and some other matters that have come up." Her voice became sharp with interest. "Has there been a development with the repayment situation?" "You could say that. Can you meet me this afternoon?" "I'll make time." The second call was to Michael Chong, my financial advisor. Michael had been managing my investment portfolio for 12 years and was one of the few people who truly understood how much wealth I had built. He was also incredibly discreet, which had served me well. "Michael, I need you to run a complete analysis on all accounts connected to Jake Henderson. Loans he's co-signed, credit lines, investments, everything. I want to understand his complete financial picture." There was a pause. "Ruth, is everything all right? You sound different." "Everything is about to be very different. How soon can you have that information? Give me 24 hours. The third call was the hardest. I dialed my son's number, knowing that after last night, our relationship had changed forever. He answered on the second ring, his voice careful. Mom, how are you feeling today? I'm feeling quite well, actually. Better than I have in a long time. I kept my tone pleasant but businesslike. I was hoping you and Carmen could come by this evening. There are things we need to discuss. About last night, Mom, Carmen is really upset. She barely slept. Maybe we should wait a few days for things to calm down. No, Jake. Tonight at 7. This can't wait. I hung up before he could argue. The meeting with Patricia that afternoon was eye-opening in ways I hadn't expected. She spread the Santos loan documents across her conference table along with several other files I hadn't seen before. Ruth, there's something you need to know about the Santos situation. They've been shopping around for refinancing options for the past 8 months. They've approached 4 different private lenders trying to consolidate their debts. My stomach tightened. What kind of debts? Beyond your loan, they owe approximately $600,000 to various creditors. Credit cards, supplier payments, equipment leases that went into default. They've been using your money to make minimum payments on everything else while letting your loan slide. The betrayal hurt, but it wasn't the worst part. Patricia pulled out another document, stamped with the seal of the probate court. They also filed a preliminary inquiry 8 months ago about challenging estate plans. Specifically, they wanted to understand the process for contesting wills when there are questions about mental capacity. The room seemed to spin around me. Whose will? They didn't specify, but given the timing and the context, I think we can make some educated guesses. I stared at the document, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. They think I'm losing my mental capacity. It appears they're laying groundwork for that argument, yes. The inquiry specifically asked about situations where elderly individuals make financial decisions that seem inconsistent with their established patterns of behavior. Like a poor flower shop owner somehow having $3 million to loan to people. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. The Santos family wasn't just ignoring their loan. They were planning to claim I had never been competent to make it in the first place. Patricia, I want you to do something for me. Yes. I want a complete psychiatric evaluation performed by the most respected neuropsychologist in the state. I want cognitive tests, memory assessments, everything. And I want it documented that I requested this evaluation myself while clearly demonstrating sound judgment. She nodded, making notes. That's smart. It establishes baseline competency and shows you're taking proactive steps to address any concerns. There's more. I want you to prepare a new will, a very specific one. I spent the next hour outlining exactly what I wanted. Patricia's eyebrows rose higher with each instruction, but she recorded everything. That evening, Jake and Carmen arrived at my house exactly at 7. Carmen looked like she had been crying, her usual perfect makeup smudged. Jake seemed nervous, playing with his car keys. Please sit down, I said, pointing to my small living room. Can I get you anything to drink? Mom, we really need to talk about last night, Jake began immediately. Carmen's parents are very upset. They're saying you're confused about some financial arrangement, but they don't want to embarrass you by. Stop. My voice cut through his rambling like a knife. Just stop talking for a moment and listen. I walked to my desk and got a folder I had prepared. These are copies of all the loan documents between your wife's parents and my investment company. Every page is signed, notarized, and legally binding. I handed the folder to Jake, watching his face as he looked through the pages. His expression changed from doubt to confusion to dawning realization. This is real, he said quietly. Very real. $3 million borrowed 4 years ago. Payments stopped completely 10 months ago. Current amount owed, including interest and penalties, is $3,200,018. Carmen finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How do you have this kind of money? I earned it over 35 years of careful investing and business consulting. While you were assuming I was some pathetic old woman barely scraping by, I was building a financial portfolio that would make your parents' restaurants look like lemonade stands. Jake set the folder down with shaking hands. But you never said. You always acted like money was tight. You live in this small house. You drive that old truck. Because I choose to, I said firmly. Because I learned a long time ago that people treat you differently when they know you have money. They start seeing you as a resource rather than a person. I looked directly at Carmen. Your parents came to me because they were facing bankruptcy. They begged me to help them. Promised they would make faithful payments. Swore this would stay confidential to protect their dignity. I agreed because I thought it would help my son's marriage. Carmen's face had gone completely white. They told me they found an investor, some businessman who believed in their restaurants. I am that businessman, Carmen. I saved your parents from losing everything. I made it possible for them to maintain their lifestyle, to continue funding your expensive tastes, to keep up appearances in your social circle. Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was overwhelmed. I don't understand. If you have all this money, why did you let us think? Why did you let me worry about your retirement, your future security? The hurt in his voice almost broke my resolve, but I pressed on. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted to know that you valued our relationship, not just my ability to solve your problems with money. And now? Carmen asked, her voice hollow. I pulled out my phone and showed them a recording app. Now I know exactly what you both think of me. Last night, in front of 50 people, you called me bitter, pathetic, jealous. You made it clear that you see me as a burden, an embarrassment. I played a section of audio from the previous evening, their own voices filling the small room with their harsh words. Carmen winced as she heard herself calling me tacky and bitter. I recorded everything, I said simply. The entire conversation is documented. Jake leaned forward, his face desperate. Mom, we were upset. We said things we didn't mean. No, Jake, you said exactly what you meant. You said what you've been thinking for years. What Carmen has been telling you about me. That I'm worthless, that I have nothing to offer, that my presence in your lives is an inconvenience. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood lights. What you don't know is that I've been supporting your lifestyle for years. That accounting firm you started. 5 of your first 8 clients were companies I referred to you. The bank loan for your expansion. I co-signed it quietly through a subsidiary corporation. The silence behind me was deafening. That house you live in. I helped structure the financing in ways that saved you hundreds of thousands in taxes and interest. Your retirement accounts, your investment portfolio, even Carmen's jewelry collection. All of it was made possible by advice, connections, and direct financial support that you never knew about. I turned back to face them. Jake looked devastated, while Carmen appeared to be in shock. But here's what's really interesting, I continued, my voice growing colder. I discovered today that your parents haven't just been ignoring their debt to me. They've been actively planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can void the loan entirely. Carmen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. They filed inquiries with the probate court about challenging wills and estate plans. They've been laying groundwork to claim that I was mentally incapacitated when I made the loan, that I couldn't possibly have had that kind of money to lend. Jake stared at me in horror. They wouldn't. They couldn't. They absolutely could, and they were planning to with your help. What do you mean? I pulled out the final document from my folder. This is a statement prepared by a private investigator I hired. It details conversations you've had with Carmen's parents over the past 8 months about my declining mental state, and your concerns about my erratic behavior with money. Jake's face went ashen. That's not. I never said you were incompetent. I was just worried about you. About some of the decisions you were making. Like what decisions, Jake? Like living in this small house when you could afford better. Like driving that old truck. like not taking vacations or enjoying your retirement. It seemed like you were hoarding money irrationally or maybe not understanding your own financial situation. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. So when Carmen's parents needed character witnesses to support their claim that I wasn't mentally competent to make large financial decisions, they had your concerned observations to back them up. I didn't know, Carmen whispered. I didn't know they were planning anything like that. But you knew about the loan. Not at first. They told me last month when you stopped returning their calls about payments. They said you were confused, that you thought they owed you money, but it was all a misunderstanding. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. A $3 million misunderstanding. They said you were getting old, maybe mixing up your business accounts with personal money. They were trying to figure out how to handle it gently without embarrassing you or getting you in trouble. How thoughtful of them. Jake stood up suddenly, pacing to the far side of the room. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. My mother is apparently a millionaire. My in-laws are con artists. And my wife's family has been planning to destroy you legally. That's a fairly accurate summary. He turned to face me, his expression desperate. What happens now? I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and protected, who had stood by and watched his wife tear me apart because he believed I was beneath his notice. Then I looked at Carmen, beautiful and entitled and completely unprepared for the world that was about to crash down around her. Now, I said quietly, you both learn what it really costs to treat someone as disposable. The next morning, I began dismantling the invisible support system I had built around my son's life with the careful precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. Each cut was clean, calculated, and irreversible. My first stop was Community First Bank, where I had maintained business relationships for over 15 years. Robert Kim, the senior vice president, greeted me with the warm familiarity reserved for clients whose portfolios commanded respect. Ruth, wonderful to see you. How was your birthday party? I heard it was quite the celebration. It was illuminating, Robert. That's actually why I'm here. I need to make some changes to several accounts and credit facilities. We sat in his office surrounded by dark wood furniture and photographs of Robert with various local business leaders. I pulled out a folder containing loan documents and co-signer agreements that Jake had never known existed. I need to remove myself as guarantor from the Henderson Accounting business credit line, I said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. Robert frowned as he reviewed the documents. This is a substantial facility, Ruth. $800,000. Your guarantee is what made this loan possible. Without it, the loan will need to be restructured based solely on the business's current assets and cash flow, which may not qualify for the same terms or amount. That's Mr. Henderson's problem to solve. Robert studied my face, clearly recognizing that this wasn't a casual business decision. Are you certain about this? Once we process this change, it can't be undone without a complete reapplication process. I'm completely certain. The second stop was Summit Investments, where Michael Chong managed my portfolio. His office was more modern than Robert's, all glass and steel and contemporary art. But the conversation was equally straightforward. The analysis you requested is complete, Michael said, handing me a thick report. Your son's financial situation is more precarious than I expected. I flipped through the pages, seeing my suspicions confirmed in black and white. Jake's accounting business was heavily leveraged, dependent on credit lines I had guaranteed and clients I had referred. His personal finances were stretched thin, with mortgage payments on a house that was worth less than what he owed, car payments on 2 luxury vehicles, and credit card debt that had been growing steadily. Without the business income from those 5 major clients, his cash flow would be negative within 90 days, Michael explained. Those 5 major clients were all companies I had been consulting with for years, businesses I had directed to Jake when he was starting out. They had continued working with him partly out of loyalty to me, and partly because I had been quietly ensuring their satisfaction by reviewing his work and making corrections when necessary. I want you to contact Martinez Construction, Valley Medical Group, Peterson's Auto Parts, Sunrise Bakery, And Green Thumb Landscaping, I said. Inform them that I'll be taking over their accounts directly, effective immediately. Michael raised an eyebrow. That's approximately 70% of Henderson Accounting's revenue. Yes, it is. Ruth, I have to ask. Is everything all right? These seem like very drastic measures. I thought about Jake's words from the previous night, the casual dismissal, the assumption that I was useless. Everything is exactly as it should be, Michael. My third stop was the most difficult. Maria Santos had agreed to meet me for lunch at the Riverside Cafe, where I had celebrated many business successes over the years. She looked older than I remembered, stress lines deepening around her eyes, her usual perfect composure cracked at the edges. Ruth, thank you for agreeing to meet. I hope we can work this out peacefully. We sat at a quiet table overlooking the river. The same view I had enjoyed when Carmen called me Tacky in front of all my friends. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maria, I'm going to be very direct. I know about the probate court inquiries. I know about your plans to challenge my mental competency. And I know you've been using money from my loan to pay other debts while ignoring your obligations to me. Her face went pale, but she maintained her dignified composure. I don't know what you're talking about. I placed a folder on the table between us. These are copies of every financial transaction your family has made in the past 8 months, courtesy of a very thorough forensic accountant. Shall I read through them? Maria's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. How did you? That information is private. Not when you're in default on a $3 million loan, it isn't. My attorneys have been very thorough. I opened the folder and began reading. April 15th, payment to American Express, $28,400. April 18th, payment to BMW Financial, $9,900. April 22nd, payment to Carmen's credit card, $18,600. Maria's composure finally cracked. Stop, please. May 3rd, wire transfer to Carmen's account for her shopping trip, $32,000. May 7th, payment to the country club for her anniversary party, $8,200. I said stop. I closed the folder. Every payment I just listed was made with money from my loan. Money you promised would be used to stabilize your restaurants. Instead, you've been funding your daughter's lifestyle while planning to claim I'm mentally incompetent so you don't have to pay me back. Maria stared down at her untouched salad. Her voice barely a whisper. We were desperate. The restaurants were failing faster than we expected. We thought if we could just maintain appearances for a while longer, something would turn around. And if it didn't turn around? She didn't answer. You were going to destroy my reputation, question my mental capacity, and potentially have me declared incompetent. All to avoid repaying money you borrowed in good faith. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it did happen like this, and now there will be consequences. I pulled out a formal notice that Patricia had prepared. This is a demand for immediate payment of the full outstanding balance plus penalties. $3,412,000 due within 30 days. Maria's face went white. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. Then you'll need to liquidate assets. The restaurants, the house, the boat I've heard so much about. Please, Ruth, there has to be another way. What if we could work out a new payment plan? Maria, you had a payment plan. You ignored it for 10 months while spending my money on luxury items and planning to have me declared incompetent. There is no new payment plan. She was crying now, mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks. This will destroy us. Carmen doesn't know how bad things are. This will ruin her marriage, her whole life. Her marriage is built on a foundation of lies and borrowed money. Maybe it's time she learned to live in the real world. I stood to leave, but Maria grabbed my arm desperately. Wait, there's something else you need to know about Jake. I sat back down, curious despite myself. Carmen has been working on him for months, convincing him that you're becoming unstable. She's been documenting every conversation you've had, every decision you've made that seemed unusual to her. She was building a case. A case for what? For having you declared incompetent. She wanted Jake to petition for guardianship over your affairs. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. Guardianship. She convinced him that you needed protection from yourself, that you were making poor financial decisions and needed someone to manage your money before you lost everything. I felt a cold fury building in my chest. She wanted control of my assets. She thought. We all thought you maybe had a few $100,000 saved up. Enough to be worth managing, but not enough to matter in the long run. And Jake agreed to this. Maria nodded miserably. He loves you, Ruth. He really does. But Carmen made it sound like he was protecting you. She showed him articles about elderly financial abuse, stories about seniors who lost their savings to scams. She made him believe that taking control of your finances was an act of love. I stared across the river, processing this information. My own son had been prepared to strip away my autonomy, to treat me like a child who couldn't manage her own affairs. All because his wife had convinced him it was for my own good. When was this supposed to happen? Soon. Carmen was waiting for one more incident. Something she could point to as evidence of declining capacity. She thought your birthday party might provide the opportunity. And it did, didn't it? My revelation about the loan. She'll claim that's proof I'm delusional. Maria looked ashamed. That was the plan. I stood again, this time with finality. Thank you for telling me the truth, Maria. It changes nothing about the loan, but at least now I understand the complete picture. What happens now? I looked down at this woman who had raised the daughter-in-law who was systematically poisoning my relationship with my son, who had taken my money while planning my destruction. Now you face the consequences of your choices, all of you. That evening, I sat in my small house reviewing the events of the day. 4 phone calls had already come in from Jake. Apparently, his business credit line had been frozen pending restructuring, and 3 of his major clients had terminated their contracts. I let each call go to voicemail. The 5th call was from Carmen. Her voice was high and panicked. Ruth, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank, and my parents are saying crazy things about loans and money, and Jake is having problems with his business. Please call me back. We need to figure this out. I deleted the message and poured myself a glass of tea. Outside my window, the neighborhood sparkled in the darkness, full of people living their lives, making their choices, facing their consequences. Tomorrow I would take the next step. Tonight I would enjoy the peace. For the first time in years, no one was taking anything from me. No one was manipulating me, using me, or planning my downfall. I was finally completely in control of my own life. And it felt magnificent. The desperate attempts to reconcile began exactly 72 hours after I had frozen Jake's credit line. I was in my garden watering my roses when I heard frantic knocking at my front door, followed by Carmen's voice calling through the wood. Ruth, please. I know you're in there. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I finished watering my favorite yellow roses before walking to the door. Through the window, I could see Carmen pacing on my front porch. Her usually perfect hair was messy, her makeup smudged. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Hello, Carmen. You look tired. Please, she said, her voice cracking. Please, can we just sit down and talk about this? There's been some terrible misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding. Would you like me to play the recording from my birthday party again? The one where you called me tacky and bitter. She flinched as if I had slapped her. I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. People say things when they're emotional. People reveal who they truly are when they're emotional. That's when the masks come off. Carmen's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. My parents are losing everything, she whispered. The bank is foreclosing on the restaurants. They're talking about selling the house. Jake's business is falling apart. His clients are leaving. His credit line is frozen. We might lose our house too. I imagine that must be very stressful for you. Don't you care? Jake is your son. Don't you care what this is doing to him? I leaned against my doorframe, studying this young woman who had spent 4 years treating me like an embarrassing relative she was forced to tolerate. Tell me, Carmen, when you were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, did you care what that would do to me? Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Your mother told me everything. The guardianship plan, the way you've been documenting my behavior, convincing Jake that I needed protection from myself. You were going to take control of my finances and treat me like a child who couldn't manage her own affairs. Carmen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? You thought I was some pathetic old woman with maybe a few $100,000 you could manage for me. Instead, you discovered I have enough money to destroy your entire family's financial stability with a single phone call. Please, she said again, but the word came out strangled. Please what? Please let your family keep the money they stole. Please pretend that you didn't spend 4 years treating me with contempt. Please ignore the fact that you were planning to strip away my autonomy. I stepped back into my house. The answer is no, Carmen. To all of it. I closed the door before she could respond, but I could hear her sobbing on the other side. Part of me, the part that had raised Jake alone, that had always tried to be the peacemaker, wanted to open the door and comfort her. But that part of me had died at my birthday party when my own son called me jealous and useless. An hour later, Jake arrived. He looked exhausted, older than his 35 years, wearing clothes that looked like he had slept in them. This time I did let him in, but I didn't offer him coffee or ask him to sit down. Mom, you have to stop this. Whatever point you're trying to make, I get it. You're angry. You have every right to be angry. But this is destroying innocent people. Innocent people. I raised an eyebrow. Your wife was planning to have me declared incompetent so she could control my money. Your in-laws borrowed $3 million from me and then planned to claim I was mentally unfit to have made the loan. Where exactly do you see innocence in any of this? Jake ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his childhood that my heart clenched despite everything. I didn't know about any of that. I swear to you, Mom. I had no idea what they were planning. But you did think I was becoming mentally unstable. He was quiet for a long moment. I was concerned about some of your choices. Living in this small house when you could afford better, driving that old truck, not taking vacations. It seemed like you might be having trouble managing your money properly. So you were prepared to take away my right to make those choices. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From living the way I wanted to live. From spending my money the way I chose to spend it. From making decisions that didn't meet your approval. I stared at my son, this man I had raised to be independent and strong, who had been so easily manipulated into believing his mother was incompetent. Jake, I've been managing money successfully for 35 years. I built a consulting business from nothing. I accumulated wealth that you can't even comprehend. I made investments that turned thousands into millions. And you thought I needed your protection. I didn't know about any of that success. You never told me. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted our relationship to be real. His voice cracked. It is real, Mom. I do love you. No, Jake. You love the version of me that you can feel superior to. The struggling flower shop owner who needed your concern and your management. You don't love the successful businesswoman who's been supporting your career behind the scenes for years. That's not true. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I had prepared. These are copies of every favor I've done for you, every client I've referred, every loan I've guaranteed, every obstacle I've quietly removed from your path. For 12 years, I've been ensuring your success while letting you believe you were doing it all on your own. Jake took the folder with trembling hands, flipping through pages of bank documents, client referral letters, and guarantee agreements he had never known existed. Why? He whispered. Because I wanted you to have confidence in yourself. I wanted you to believe in your own abilities. But I also wanted to protect you from failure. And now you get to find out what you can actually accomplish without my help. Mom, please. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at this man who shared my eyes and my stubborn chin, who had been the center of my world for 35 years. It means everything, Jake. That's why this hurts so much. Then don't do this. Don't destroy my marriage, my business, my whole life over something that can't be undone. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply stopping my support. You're a grown man with a college degree and 12 years of business experience. If you can't maintain your lifestyle without secret help from your mother, then maybe that lifestyle was never really sustainable. What about Carmen? She made mistakes, but she loves me. She's pregnant, Mom. I felt my heart skip a beat. What? She's 10 weeks pregnant. We just found out yesterday. She's terrified about what's happening with our finances, with her parents. The stress isn't good for the baby. For a moment, the room was completely silent. A grandchild. Another chance at family, at love that wasn't tainted by manipulation and greed. Then I remembered Carmen calling me tacky and bitter. Jake agreeing that I was jealous and useless. The guardianship papers that would have stripped away my autonomy. Congratulations, I said quietly. Mom, please, for the baby's sake, can't we find a way to work this out? I walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood that had been my home for so many years. Somewhere out there, Maria and Carlos Santos were probably meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. Somewhere else, Carmen was crying over bank statements and foreclosure notices. I'll make you a deal, I said finally. Jake's face lit up with hope. Full repayment of the Santos loan within 60 days. $3,412,000. His face fell. You know they don't have that kind of money. Then they'll need to liquidate assets. Houses, businesses, investments, jewelry, everything. That will leave them with nothing. They'll have their health and their freedom. That's more than they were planning to leave me with. What about my business? What about the guarantees you withdrew? Your business succeeds or fails based on your own merit now. No more help from me. And us. What about our relationship? I turned back to face him, memorizing his features as if I might never see him again. That depends entirely on you, Jake. Whether you can love and respect the real me, not just the version you thought you could control. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. I never wanted to control you. I thought I was helping. I know you did. That's what makes this so tragic. After he left, I sat in my quiet house as the afternoon faded into evening. The silence felt different now, heavier. I was getting what I had demanded. Respect, recognition, consequences for those who had wronged me. But the cost was higher than I had anticipated. A grandchild was coming, and I might never know him or her. My son might never forgive me for this. The family I had spent 35 years building and protecting was crumbling around me. But for the first time in years, no one was taking advantage of me. No one was manipulating me or planning my downfall. I was finally free to be exactly who I was without apology or explanation. The question was freedom worth the price of being alone? I poured myself a glass of tea and watched the sun set over the neighborhood, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new consequences. But tonight I was simply Ruth Henderson, successful businesswoman, millionaire, survivor. And that would have to be enough. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Commerce Tower wearing a tailored gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The marble floors gleamed beneath my feet, reflecting the crystal chandeliers that cast warm light across the space. This was my building now, one of 4 commercial properties I had purchased in the past 2 months. The elevator carried me to the 12th floor, where glass doors bore the inscription Henderson Financial Consulting, Private Wealth Management. My new office occupied half the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city I had called home for so many years. My assistant, Linda, a professional woman in her 40s who came highly recommended, greeted me with my morning schedule. Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. You have the Williams consultation at 10, lunch with the Chamber of Commerce at noon, and the Business Journal interview at 3. Thank you, Linda. Any messages? Several. Your lawyer called about the Santos bankruptcy proceedings. Everything is finalized. Your accountant needs to review some tax implications for the new acquisitions. And she hesitated. And your son called again. That's the 5th time this week. I nodded, taking the message slip without looking at it. Hold my calls until after the Williams meeting. The transformation had been gradual at first, then sudden. After Jake left my house that day, I had made a decision that changed everything. I was done hiding who I was. Within a week, I had hired the best image consultant in the city, updated my wardrobe, and had professional photographs taken. I had registered Henderson Financial as a full-service wealth management firm and begun reaching out to the network of contacts I had built over 3 decades. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Apparently, whispers of the mysterious investor who had been making smart money moves behind the scenes had been circulating for years. When I emerged from the shadows, clients lined up to work with a woman who had quietly built a fortune while maintaining the discretion they valued. My first major success was convincing 4 family trusts worth a combined $1 billion to move their portfolios to my firm. Word spread quickly through the wealthy circles of the city. Ruth Henderson was the real deal. The Santos bankruptcy had been swift and brutal. Unable to meet my payment demands, they had been forced to liquidate everything. The restaurants sold to a competitor for pennies on the dollar. The house went to pay creditors. The boat, the art collection, even Maria's jewelry. All of it went to auction. They had moved to a modest apartment across town, both taking jobs they were overqualified for but desperate to have. Carlos worked as a kitchen manager at a chain restaurant owned by his former competitor. Maria worked part-time at a flower shop, arranging bouquets she could never afford to buy. Carmen had been devastated. The pregnancy had been difficult, complicated by stress and the dramatic change in her circumstances. She had lost the designer clothes, the spa treatments, the lifestyle that had defined her identity. Worst of all, she had had to watch her parents' humiliation, knowing it was partially her fault. Jake's business had struggled initially after losing my support, but he had proven more resilient than I had expected. He had downsized, moved to a smaller office, and focused on building genuine relationships with clients rather than relying on my referrals. It was harder work, less profitable but more honest. They had sold the house I had helped them buy and moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Jake drove a used sedan instead of his luxury car. Carmen shopped at discount stores instead of boutiques. But they were surviving. The baby had been born 2 months ago, a healthy son they had named Thomas. The birth announcement had been simple, sent by email with a small photograph. No elaborate celebration, no expensive gifts from grandparents, just a quiet welcome for a new life entering an uncertain world. I had stared at that photograph for a long time, memorizing my grandson's tiny features, wondering if I would ever hold him, ever know his laugh or comfort his tears. The Business Journal interview that afternoon was supposed to focus on my business success, but the journalist was more interested in the personal story. "You've become something of a legend in financial circles," she said, her recorder capturing every word. "The flower shop owner who secretly built an empire. What drove you to keep it hidden for so long?" I considered the question carefully. I learned early that people's perception of you changes when they know you have money. They start seeing you as a resource rather than a person. I wanted my relationships to be based on who I was, not what I had. And did that strategy work? I smiled, but there was sadness in it. It revealed exactly what my relationships were really worth. "You've been estranged from your son for 6 months now. Do you have any regrets about how you handled the situation?" "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret standing up for myself." "What would it take for reconciliation?" I thought about that question long after the interview ended. What would it take? An apology would be a start, but not enough. Real change, genuine respect, acknowledgement of the damage that had been done. Those things took time to develop and even longer to prove. That evening I was reviewing investment proposals in my new apartment. I had finally moved out of my small house into a luxury high-rise when my doorman called. Mrs. Henderson, there's a young woman here with a baby. Says she's your daughter-in-law. Should I send her up? I hesitated for a long moment. Yes, send her up. 5 minutes later, I opened my door to find Carmen standing in my hallway, holding a blue bundle in her arms. She looked different, older, more tired, but somehow more real. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of designer clothes. And there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Humility. Hello, Ruth. Thank you for seeing me. Come in. She walked into my new living room, taking in the expensive furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their stunning view. But her attention quickly returned to the baby in her arms. This is Thomas, she said quietly. Your grandson. I stared down at the sleeping infant, feeling my heart constrict with a longing I had been suppressing for months. He had Jake's nose and what looked like my chin. He's beautiful. Would you like to hold him? With trembling hands, I reached for my grandson. He was so light, so perfect, so completely innocent of all the pain and betrayal that had brought us to this moment. I owe you an apology, Carmen said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just for what I said at your party, but for everything. For the way I treated you. The way I convinced Jake to see you as a burden instead of the remarkable woman you are. I looked up from the baby to study Carmen's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine remorse. I was spoiled and entitled and cruel, she continued. I thought money and status were the only things that mattered. I looked down on you because I thought you had less than me. And when I discovered you had more, I was threatened. And now I understand what my parents did to you, what I participated in doing to you. We took advantage of your generosity and your love for Jake. We planned to take away your autonomy. We treated you like you were disposable. She was crying now, silent tears that she didn't try to wipe away. I know you have every right to hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. And I wanted you to meet your grandson. I held Thomas closer, breathing in that sweet baby scent, feeling his tiny heartbeat against my chest. What does Jake know about this visit? Nothing. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks you'll never forgive us. That we've lost you forever. And what do you think? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. I think that would be fair. But I hope maybe someday you might give us a chance to earn your trust back. That would take time. Years, probably. I know. And it would require real change. Not just words, actions, proof. I understand. Thomas stirred in my arms, making soft baby sounds. I looked down at his perfect face and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, the hurt, the betrayal. But love was there too. Not for Carmen, not yet. But for this innocent child who deserved better than the legacy of pain his family had created. I'm not ready to forgive, I said finally. I may never be ready. But I am ready to consider the possibility that people can change. Carmen's face lit up with hope. Small steps, I warned. Supervised visits with Thomas. Family counseling with Jake. Complete transparency about your finances and decisions. And if there's ever another betrayal, any attempt to manipulate or take advantage, it ends permanently. Yes, she said immediately. Yes, absolutely. And Carmen. Yes. I'm not the same woman who used to hide her success to make others comfortable. I won't pretend to be less than I am ever again. If we're going to rebuild this relationship, it will be with full honesty about who we all really are. She nodded, wiping her tears. I wouldn't want it any other way. As she prepared to leave, I made a decision that surprised even me. Carmen. She turned back hopefully. Tell Jake he can call me. Not to apologize or make excuses, but to talk about Thomas, about being grandparents, about what comes next. Her smile was radiant. I will. Thank you. After they left, I stood in my beautiful apartment, surrounded by all the symbols of my success, holding a small blue blanket that still smelled like baby powder. The silence felt different now. Not empty but full of possibility. I had learned that liberation wasn't just about breaking free from those who had wronged me. It was about choosing who to let back in, on what terms, and with what expectations. Tomorrow Jake would call. We would have difficult conversations about trust and forgiveness and the long road back to being a family. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be no guarantees. But for the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. The city sparkled beyond my windows, full of people making their own choices, facing their own consequences, rebuilding their own lives. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of human experience, my grandson was sleeping peacefully, dreaming baby dreams in a world where his grandmother was finally, completely, authentically herself. That was enough. That was everything. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the end.